Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive EV, live on YouTube. I know it's been a minute, it's been a while, but I finally had a little bit of downtime. Let me make sure I'm not peeking here. Okay. Yeah, sorry. OBS audio's been all over the place, but yeah, I wanted to kind of do a video, but I've been driving in this car so much, I didn't even catch the exact moment I hit 50,000. I was really hoping I would, because for those who don't know, the big kind of milestone that you reach at 50,000 miles is your vehicle is officially out of the basic vehicle limited warranty, which doesn't mean that your battery pack and powertrain are out of warranty. But it does mean that little things like if door handles break or if windows stop working or control arms need to be replaced, or a seat goes bad, which I have had happen. This is the exact seat that I had to have replaced. Now all of that stuff is no longer covered by Tesla, so I'm going to have to pay out of pocket for it. So the true cost of EV ownership is actually tested here. Now, thankfully, because I'm aware of the vehicle limited warranty, I tried to get any tiny little thing that bothered me in the car fixed before I hit that 50,000 mile mark. I did not care about a lot of the things I had them fixed, but I was just like, while it's covered, I might as well get this addressed. I might as well get this looked at. Things like, not on the passenger side, but this panel here on the driver's side was separating, and it was quite a bit open. You could see the wires behind it and stuff, and I was like, ooh, yikes, that's not good. So they fixed that, thankfully, even though the guy I checked in with at the service center said they couldn't fix it that day. I talked to the technician, he fixed it. Also, thankfully, they've done a very great job fixing the dashboard. That's, the big plastic piece right behind the display, kind of the table, the dash, I guess you could call it. It was squeaking pretty bad. There was a lot of rattle coming from the driver's side of it. Not really sure what caused it, but it was the type of thing that wasn't like a deal breaker, like sell the car, but it was certainly annoying me, and I was under warranty. So I said, you know what? Why don't you guys fix that? I always feel like I'm, excuse me. I always feel like a little nervous asking them to fix things, because there's been times in the past where, when I first took delivery of my car, there was a panel misalignment on the rear driver's side window, and they fixed that, but then I noticed more wind noise when I got it back, so I took it there again and asked them to fix the wind noise. Still couldn't really fix it. Now, for the most part, I went back a third time, and it mostly had been fixed, but I still hear it occasionally. It actually just depends on the weather, I've discovered. So in the hot weather, I don't hear it much, which is good because it's very hot where I live. But in the cold weather, it tends to come back a little bit. I don't know if it has something to do with the metal, the door shrinking or something. I don't know. Something very minor that they weren't able to troubleshoot. But my point was, I didn't have a flawless track record with the service centers, which is why I was a little hesitant taking anything in for service, because I'm like, they might fix it, they might not, or they might cause new problems in the process, and then I have to go back again. So I wasn't sure, but thankfully, the service center I went to up north was actually pretty good, and they have fixed it, so I haven't heard any rattled or squeaks from the dashboard since. I wonder, though, and I want to hear, I see a lot of people checking in, at 22,000 miles on my Model Y, just under 10 months of driving. Nice! Congratulations, Harvey. Hey, Mike in the Woods, how goes it? It's going well. I loved your last video with the skunk. That was amazing. Tony said, hit 75,000 on my Model Y recently, about 9% degradation. That's far. Yeah, not terrible. In the past 6 months, my HVAC system has started to make a slightly deeper hum than previously. Not terrible, but noticeable. I think I've noticed something similar. It could also just be because I didn't drive my Model 3 a ton last summer. That's the funny thing, is that I've hit 50,000 miles on this car in under 2 years. The official 2 years since I took delivery mark will be, I think, August 23rd. So I still have another 3 weeks before I officially hit 2 years. And I've already drove over the basic vehicle warranty. So at least I can say, hey, I didn't buy this thing to have it sit around and look pretty. We bought an EV because we drive a lot, and I think that kind of helps, at least with the EV ownership experience, kind of sharing my experience with a not super high range Tesla, not an all-wheel drive Tesla, and there's actually a decent chance we're going to be driving it around in some not extreme, but fairly notable winter conditions later this year. I'm going to be taking it up north kind of later into the year, and I do have some chains for the tires that I haven't really had the right opportunity to use yet, because obviously where I live it's super hot and it never snows here, but the place I'm visiting it does snow and it can get icy, so we're going to see how the rear-wheel drive Model 3 performs in the cold. Same thing with LFP and all that. Marngel says, you drove more miles with your Model 3 in 2 years than I did in my car in 4 years. That'll happen when you road trip a lot. But what I was going to say is part of the reason I think I may notice the HVAC hum a bit more in this car than I used to is we've had a very hot summer. I think hotter than last summer. And the other thing was, last summer, despite me hitting all these miles, I was gone for like 6 weeks. Out of the country, didn't have access to my car. So my car was literally just parked at my friend Mike's house for a month and a half, not being driven at all. So there's still a good, I guess you could say, 3 weeks. There's like 2 months. So we haven't really had 48 months of driving yet. We've had like 46 months of driving and hit 50,000 miles. So if we're not counting the time I'm away from the car, let's see. 50,000 miles, divide that by 46 months. I'm averaging a little over 1,000 miles a month. I guess that's not terribly, is that right? 50,000 miles divided by 46. Yeah, a little over 1,000 miles a month, which I don't think is that unusual. Whoa, the Bluetooth is connected. Yeah, good thing I've got those winter tires. Tesla was just prepping me for the future. That's what it was. Tony says, replace the cabin air filter, but that doesn't seem to have changed anything. Maybe I should have condenser cleaner too. At X Takeover, I met some at a connection resix. Okay, are we back? Sorry about that. Haven't usually had issues. That's annoying. Sorry, folks. Yeah, the stream bugged out. I guess I haven't streamed from the car in a while. Maybe the Wi-Fi is more picky. I don't know. Are we back? Can you hear me? Hopefully that's not good. Let's see. F. I don't think it's your internet sucking. It's mine. Just as we got... Please be back. Okay. Bandwidth is slowly recovering, which is nice. Let me see if that fixed it. I need fiber. I don't live where I have fiber. But sounds like your fiber's not that constant either. Whoa, that's loud. I think we're slowly coming back. Oh, Starlink was far more inconsistent, but anyway. I have to go after this, which is why I wanted to be in the car anyway, but I figured we're talking about the car, might as well be in the car. I think the laptop got picky about how far I was from the router, so I moved it. Maybe it's more comfortable here, I'm not sure. Hopefully it is. Let's see. You have a 2022 Model 3 long range. I'm 30 miles from hitting 20,000. I work from home a lot. Would it be beneficial to upgrade to Model Y refresh for more room or camping? Any thoughts? Yeah, I mean, the new Model Y is going to be sweet, but it's totally up to your use cases, especially if I feel like you're working from home a lot. You can car camp in a Model 3. I've done it multiple times now. In my opinion, the Model Y, I'm sure, will be better at it, but I still think it's car camping at the end of the day. Anytime you're car camping, you're going to have to compromise a little bit on comfort and space. But the Model 3 gets a bad rep. I mean, you can move these front row seats up quite a bit, and we don't even have a custom-made air mattress. We just use a memory foam pad, and we fold it in half. It's meant for like a queen bed, but you can fold it in half and get it to the right dimensions of the Model 3. And my wife and I went camping just a few weeks ago, actually, and ran the HVAC all night, and it was marvelous. So I definitely don't want everybody to think like, oh, it can only be done in the Model Y, because I don't think that's true. But um, Mike in the Woods says, I've slept in my Model 3 at all points in the year, including the dead of winter. Camp mode is awesome. I agree. That's one of the main detractors, unfortunately, for me with the Cybertruck. Cybertruck has a lot of cool features. Personally, I love the look. I think the Cybertruck's a really futuristic, eye-catching design, and for its size, it is fairly efficient. For a vehicle that's close to the size of an F-150, being able to hit, pretty high into the 2-ish miles per kilowatt hour, close to 3 miles per kilowatt hour. That's pretty insane levels of efficiency for a vehicle that big. But my biggest detractor with it is there's just not a great way to camp in it. I genuinely, for my use case of car camping, I genuinely think the Model 3 is a better car camper than the Cybertruck. Because, for one, the Cybertruck's crazy expensive. That's just besides the point. But on top of that, the process of turning the Cybertruck into a camper is objectively more expensive and complicated. Either you have to buy the $3,000 Cyber tent, or you could go the Chris from Dirty Tesla route and make a, buy one of those $100, $200 tents, fold down the tailgate, and then encompass the bed of the truck with a little bit of the ground to have kind of a half tent. But then you don't have the HVAC, so you have to buy a air conditioning pump or turn on camp mode inside the Cybertruck cabin, have a tube that goes out the window and into the bed. And the fact that there's just not some kind of pass-through to get air moving from the cabin to the bed is a missed opportunity to me. So I know a lot of people like the Cybertruck, and I've seen actually a decent number of people using them for work purposes. And I firmly believe that Tesla is going to be able to drastically lower the price of the Cybertruck. I don't think it's going to be $100,000 forever. I think they're kind of nearing the end of the number of people they can find to buy the Foundation series. And I fully believe that they'll be able to undercut pretty much everybody else because Tesla knows how to cut costs. They know how to do vertical integration. They just actually made a post recently that they've built their first Cybertruck with dry electrode 4680 cells, which is supposed to massively reduce the process of making batteries and should substantially lower the cost of building EVs. So that's probably starting with the Cybertruck because it likely needs it the most because it has the biggest battery pack of the consumer grade Teslas. Obviously the Semi doesn't count, but they're probably waiting for the dry electrode process to be ironed out and finalized before they actually start volume production of the Tesla Semi, because that needs a ton of batteries too. But obviously the cost per kilowatt hour is much more sensitive when you're talking about bigger vehicles like the Semi or the Cybertruck. So I do think that Tesla will get the price much, much lower. But despite all of their focus on lower cost per kilowatt hour, I still don't think the camping experience would be as good in the Cybertruck. I just love the fact that we can fit an entire memory foam mattress in the trunk of our car and still have storage space left over for our luggage, or our clothes, whether it be in the front or in the back seat, just on the floor back there. And we drove to the campground and we just click one little switch on our second row seats to fold them flat. And then you unfold the mattress, you get your blankets out, and boom, you've got a sound isolated, which was cool because we were camping with a bunch of people. So you didn't have to hear your surroundings, and temperature controlled sleeping environment, which you just can't really do very easily with the Cybertruck. Why did Cybertruck not add a powered tailgate? Would it really add much more to the cost? There's a lot cheaper things they could have done that they didn't do, like a display option for the rear view mirror. Just have a screen up here instead of on the 18-inch display. Getting a mirror that can double as that can be a screen, that's the backup camera, and then flip back to being a regular mirror. Those are incredibly cheap. They're in a ton of very, very affordable vehicles on the road, but they chose not to because Tesla probably figured out that bypassing that step saves them a certain amount of dollars when you're scaling up production, which now that the Cybertruck is the most popular electric pickup truck, it's kind of a good indication that, yeah, Tesla's planning to mass produce this thing. I think they're probably within the next 2 years going to hit their max run rate of like 250,000 units per year. They're already, I think, have a capacity of like 110,000 or so, but some aftermarket company like Unplug should develop replacement Cybertruck seats that fold flat. That's the problem. You can't stretch them into the bed because of the tonneau cover. The tonneau cover has to roll up right behind, essentially, where the second row seats are. So you can fold the bottom parts of the second row seats up, but even if some aftermarket accessory lets you fold the top portion of them down like you can on my Model 3, it's still just a metal wall there. It's just kind of that roll-up tonneau cover kind of made it fundamentally impossible to do a mid-gate, which is kind of what you'd need in a truck to have a more appropriate enclosed space. But a lot of people have said the vault cover on the Cybertrucks are not very watertight either, so I wouldn't really trust it for camping in that regard either. But yeah, the Chevy Bolt has a rear view camera. That's true, with the mirror thing. It's not an expensive part, I assure you. Don't ask me how I know, but I know it's not an expensive part that Tesla went cheap on, because, again, it's their decision. We can argue whether or not it was a good call. It's probably a bad call for the consumer, but a good call for Tesla, because Tesla's going to be able to secure profitability on the Cybertruck much faster, which means lower the price on it much faster than pretty much everybody else. Rivian's been on the market much longer, and they still can't sell the R1T for a profit. They're trying to get there, but think of how much money they've burned in the process, and all of that money you burn, you have to recoup. It's going to take longer to reach a point of profitability, which means that you can't scale up production as quickly. So that's why Cybertruck's outselling Rivian now, too. The front seats. If the Cybertruck front seats fold flat, you would have enough space to put a mattress in there. I guess, yeah, you'd probably have to design the headrest quite a bit differently. I don't know. Could you retain the ventilated and heated seat functionality and put in a completely third-party seat? I don't know. Again, it sounds like a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of steps. Whereas in a Model 3, you just, boop, done. Same thing in the Model Y. Why did Cybertruck... Oh, I already answered that. Sorry, I got my chat over here. Johnny says, if I can squeeze 3 to 4 more years out of my ICE car waiting for new technology, should I, or buy Ioniq 6 now? I would say if your gas car still works, I would just hold on to it. The EV space in general is only getting better, in my opinion. And if you're in the market for Ioniq 6, I mean, I like the look of it. Not everybody does. I love the efficiency of it, but especially when we're in this weird phase of everybody's agreeing to move to NACS, but there's a lot of EVs that haven't done it yet. I would just be hesitant to buy a vehicle with CCS at this point, because long term I think it's probably going to go away, and then you're going to be stuck with the Betamax of EVs. So personally, I would hold on to your gas car as long as it's still working, and then whenever your ICE car conks out, they're very good at doing that. Whenever you get to the point where the engine's not working anymore, or heaven forbid, you get in an accident and it's totaled, then probably it's time to look around and see what kind of good deals you can get. Mike says, how many sets of tires have I gone through in 50,000 miles? Jeez, these random people want to call me, especially when I'm live. Sorry, can't answer that. It's probably spam. It's not a known number anyway. If you work from home a lot, yeah, I don't think... Yeah, wait for Ioniq 6 with NACS. I was going to say the other thing to wait for is the charging infrastructure to get a bit more standardized. I see a path now with more and more companies getting on board with NACS, and the Iona network being a bunch of legacy automakers wanting to work together, but as cool in theory of an idea it is, they don't have a single charger in the ground yet. And I do believe Tesla eventually will start making true V4 superchargers that can actually get, high voltage charging, because the Ioniq 6 is built on the eGMP platform, which is a higher voltage architecture, which is why I hesitate to just say wait for the Ioniq 6 to get NACS, that's not the whole story, because even if it gets NACS, most superchargers are going to be limited to about 50 kilowatts with the Ioniq 6, which is not a great charging speed, in my opinion. Until Tesla starts rolling out high voltage charging stations, you're not going to get great charging speeds. Man, okay, you're going on silent mode, iPhone. You're making way too many noises. Let me see who is trying to call me. I swear, I'm so free all day. And then the second I go live, I get all these calls. I need that AI feature that transcribes. Oh yeah, it's a spam call. It was nothing important, but does Tello have any basic goals when it comes to delivery dates, or is it way too early for that? Yeah, the basic goal is as soon as we possibly can. It's quite basic, so. But yeah, I've talked to them about, should we provide some kind of timeline to customers or reservation holders, or should we provide to them a solid date? And I'm not really on the clock with Tello right now, but I'm allowed to talk about it because it's my channel, so it's my jurisdiction. But where their mindset is in right now, I'm not saying they won't provide a timeline, but their mindset is they don't want to promise one that they can't deliver on. They've watched the startup space very closely, both Jason and Forrest, the co-founders. And because that question has come up from my end as well. I'm like, we get a lot of comments on our social media accounts, a lot from TikTok actually, which is just funny because I'm just not a big TikToker, but the Tello TikTok did pretty well. And we've gotten a lot of comments and a lot of traffic from that page, and a lot of people say, when is it coming out? When can I get one? And I'm like, okay, how should we answer that? And they said, well, a lot of startups have provided timelines and then missed them, and then that kind of upsets people. So my general timeline, my general response when people ask that is that there's still a lot of supplier contracts that need to be negotiated, which is why we don't have a super rigid timeline. But, best case scenario, a year and a half. Worst case scenario, 2 to 3 years, So it's just too early to give a super rigid one, which is why we're not saying things like end of next year, end of 2026 or something like that. So we're just being a little fuzzy on purpose because we intentionally don't want to get people super excited or fall in love with a timeline or get set on a timeline and then have us miss it. So there's just a lot of flexibility right now because they're very early in the development process. But how long are Tesla batteries supposed to last? Asked Mateo. Pretty much the life of the car. It's funny that the warranty expires at 100,000 miles, but yeah, I've seen a lot of long-term ownership reviews of people still driving Teslas with the original battery pack with well over 100,000 miles, and some have over 200,000. A handful I've seen over 300,000, but it's kind of hard to find because at least with the Model 3s and Ys, which have, in my opinion, fairly different battery packs from the Model S's and X's, which in the early days the battery packs didn't quite last as long because they didn't quite have battery management systems figured out. The earlier cell chemistries weren't as stable. They were 1865 cells. Now we're on 2170 cells, which have been improved for better cycle life, and we have better battery management systems now and that kind of thing. So it varies a lot. It's not like all Tesla batteries fail at the same time. And of course, in this vehicle that I own, it's a lithium iron phosphate battery pack. So it's not a 2170 or an 1865, but the main reason Tesla started using lithium iron phosphate battery packs is because LFP, for one, it's cheaper because there's no nickel or no manganese or cobalt in it. But also LFP is known for having a much higher cycle life than nickel, manganese, cobalt cells, which are, the elements used in 2170s or 1865. So theoretically, a lot of people have projected that the LFP battery pack, like the kind in my car, should last 1,000,000 miles, which I don't think this car will last that long. I think something else will fail before I hit 1,000,000 miles. That's a lot of miles to put on any car. But I would like to test that theory. That's why we're driving a lot and we're putting a lot of miles on the car. So if it's possible to get this car to 1 million miles, that would be really cool. But assuming I drive 50,000 miles every 2 years, it would still take me, what is that, 40 years? It would take me 40 years of driving to actually hit 1 million miles. So I think it's more likely that I would get in an accident and the vehicle would be totaled, or I think people obsess over the high voltage battery pack a bit too much when it comes to EVs. Even I was looking up owners' reviews of Chevy Bolts because I was looking at how cheap Chevy Bolts were getting. They're getting really affordable now in the used market, and a lot of them have replaced high voltage battery packs not because of degradation but because of the recall issue. But seemingly it's been fixed. There hasn't been, I think, many or any reported fires on a Chevy Bolt with the recalled battery pack installed. So there's a lot of 2017, 2018 Chevy Bolts that have brand new battery packs from 2022 that are selling for like 14,000, 13,000, and then that's before the EV tax credit if you find a dealer that supports that, which can be point of sale. So there's a lot of good deals out there, and I was looking up long-term ownership reviews, and some people had Chevy Bolts with over 100,000, 150,000 miles on them, and not a ton of degradation. Like maybe 10% degradation, maybe 15%. Even 20% degradation is livable. I mean, it just means you're stopping a little bit more frequently on a road trip, but for daily driving, oh, heck yeah, you could live with 20%, 30% degradation even. So it depends on the battery pack. In my experience, from the data I've seen, I think that the 2170 cells, which you find in a long-range Tesla, could last anywhere between 300,000 miles to 500,000 miles if well maintained. But again, it changes a lot depending on the temperatures it went through, if a lot of that was supercharging versus home charging, if it spent a lot of that at a low state of charge versus super high state of charge, and then even with equal charging characteristics with other EVs, we've seen certain batteries just at the manufacturing level age better than others. There's just a certain failure rate. Certain battery packs are going to have more cell failures than others. They're not perfectly consistent. Where we noticed in my kind of ownership reviews that I watched, where we noticed a lot more degradation and a lot less cycle life was with 2170 cells in standard range Teslas, which I think is part of the reason Tesla stopped making those, is they quickly started realizing these things are more likely to go out of service or to lose a lot of their battery health. If you look up, like, Model 3 needed a whole new high voltage battery, most of the time it's a 2019 standard range Model 3, because they shipped a lot of those back when they were trying to hit their target of $35,000, and a lot of those were like 50, 55 kilowatt hours, so not very big, which means that in order to hit average daily driving characteristics, there was a lot more cycles on the battery pack. So it's the same cell chemistry as a long range, but if you're driving it a lot, and the reviews I watched where people had to get their battery pack replaced after like 90,000 miles or 100,000 miles, it was typically because they were supercharging it a lot. Like the example I found was a standard range Model 3 from 2019, and he was using it for for Uber, ride sharing, what is it called, ride hailing or whatever, and he had to get a new high voltage battery replacement after like 90 or 100,000 miles, but he was also completely using the battery like every day, like charging it to 100%, driving it until it was nearly dead, supercharging it from dead all the way to full again, and doing that multiple times a day. So the driving characteristics and the size of the battery pack, to me, it indicated as to why that battery died a lot faster. Just because the nickel-based cells are not known for cycles into the having, what do you call it? Usually those nickel, manganese, cobalt battery packs, I think, have a cycle life around 800 to 1,000 in most tests. Before they need to be serviced, whereas an LFP is more like 2,000 to 4,000 from most of the data I've seen. But still, relatively speaking, LFP is somewhat of a new thing for a modern EV. There's not a ton of EVs that have it. There was the Coda EV that had it, but it couldn't be DC fast charged, so there wasn't a ton of data on how. And they only built like, I want to say 100 Coda EVs, so there's not a ton of data to work with on those. There's Ford Mach-E's that have started accommodating, what do you call it, LFP batteries as of recently, but that was after Tesla. So relatively speaking, it should be kind of interesting to see how they age. But the funny thing about that now is I was buying this to be like, I think LFP is the future. It's the cheapest one. If you're waiting on EVs to get cheaper, you're probably waiting on an LFP battery pack to get made into your vehicle. But now with the federal tax credit qualifying for these long-range, super affordable Teslas, I'm afraid I wouldn't recommend anybody buy one now. But it's purely because of the tax credit. It's not because the 2170 chemistry is like inherently better. It's just there's so many cost advantages for Tesla to sell a 2170 long-range Model 3. Oh, Mike is saying NMC is 2,000. Interesting. Drew will likely hit 2 more potholes before hitting 1,000,000 miles. Oh, yeah, way more than 2, that's for sure. Is Tesla planning to do LFP or NMC chemistry, or one option, or both? They're definitely starting with NMC chemistry. I can't talk too much about it, but it does have 2170 cells. And they have a supplier picked out for that I can't say, but it is a NMC chemistry. But it's a pretty big battery pack, so I expect it to last quite a while. It's a bigger battery pack than what you find in a Model S or a Model X, but only bigger by energy capacity. It's 106 kilowatt hours, and that aspect of the battery pack is kind of locked in. So lots of people have asked about using smaller battery packs or cheaper battery packs, including myself. And I kept telling them, like, yo, come on, we got to go LFP, or we got to go cheaper, we got to go smaller. And they have always been consistent. I've talked to Jason, the CEO, and Forrest, the chief technical officer, about it. They're very consistent on, of course, we will go cheaper in the future. But when you're a startup and you're funding dependent, you have to kind of focus on your higher margin vehicles first. So I'm not breaking any NDAs. I'm not going to say suppliers or anything like that, but they do have a supplier picked out. They do have a cell that they are going to use, and it's 106 kilowatt hours, and it is public to say it's 2170s and NMC. They do have some very innovative ways of assembling the battery pack. So they have a lot of innovation and a lot of proprietary stuff with how those cells go together. That's the stuff I really can't talk about, but all I can say is it's unique and it's cool and it's awesome. And like I said, the best stuff about Tello is the stuff I can't talk about, which is why it's kind of hard to work there, because as a YouTuber, you're kind of used to sharing all of the most exciting and interesting things. I want to make videos about what I think is the most interesting news of that day, and there's all this exciting stuff with Tello that it's like, can we talk about that? And they're like, no, not yet. And I'm like, come on. So there's really exciting stuff that I hope we can share someday, but 106 kilowatt hours is public. Yeah, that's not part of the NDA. They've said that on the record. That's on the website. Everybody knows that. I knew that data before they even hired me. Americans are going to have to consciously and intentionally change many driving habits. The ability to run a battery to near 0% and then fully recharge to nearly 100% kills EVs. I would argue it kills NMC batteries. It's actually not that bad in LFP. So far, I have 5% degradation. I guess I should have started the live stream off with that. Sorry about all the bandwidth issues, but I don't actually know if I have truly 5% degradation, but the range guessometer, which is not accurate, by the way. A lot of people will just charge their EV to 100% and look at the rated range and base that off of, okay, that's what my degradation is. Like, okay, technically, yes. When I got my Model 3 and I charged it to 100%, it said 272 miles, because that was the EPA rated range. Now when I charge it to 100%, it says 258. So that's about 95%. But again, I've seen that number go up before too. And I saw someone else report a very similar thing in their Tesla, where they let it deplete almost down to nothing. and then they charged it up to full again, and the number went from like 258 to 262. And your battery health never goes up, by the way. That's not physically possible. But the range guessometer can calibrate when it gets really, really low and then really, really high. It looks at how much data it was actually able to put in the high voltage battery pack. There's a way to take it into service mode, and you have to like deplete the range to very, very low, and then you plug it in and charge it up to near high, and then it gives you a more accurate battery health thing. But I've watched other people do it, and even that test is not super accurate. But I think the best way to really figure out what your EV battery health is, honestly, is to just charge it to full and then see how much energy you can pull out of it. There's a little mileage tracker. Like you have the now playing tile on your Tesla, and then you swipe to the left, and then you can see the efficiency and how many kilowatt hours you've used on this drive. If you just charge to full and see how many kilowatt hours you can pull out, and let's say you stop at 1% and it says you used like 55 kilowatt hours, then okay, you can do the reverse math and then factor in Teslas also keep driving a bit after 0%. But my point is, I haven't noticed substantial degradation, and I have been very hard on this battery. I've almost exclusively supercharged it for the last year, and a lot of the time this car is sitting at 10%, at 5%, because it's like, yeah, I know how much range I need to get back to the supercharger because I've been driving in these areas before. I know the efficiency. So a lot of the time it's at a supercharger charging all the way up to 100%, and oftentimes I'm killing it. I'm driving down to 5% or 4%. And I'm driving in the heat. I'm road tripping in it. I'm driving when it's 112 degrees out. I've been nothing but hard on this battery pack. And LFP has taken it like a champ. Very little degradation. So technically, yes, it's 5% degradation by the guessometer, but in real world usage, I hardly notice any. But what I remember more accurately is that when I first got this car, I could drive from, let's say, this one restaurant that we eat at a lot, like a good salad bar place, and I can drive from that salad bar place to home and use 10% of the battery. I did that when I first bought the car, and I can still do that today, even with the winter tires, even with the degradation. So I still lose 10% on that same route. So to me, that's an indication that there's not a lot of degradation going on. But is there a new EV coming to market soon you're itching to check out in person? Oh, there's a ton, of course, but you're not going to like most of them. I really like the ID Buzz. I'm sorry. I watched MKBHD's video on the ID Buzz. Maybe it's not the ID Buzz itself I'm not excited about. It's just I love sliding doors, and I think they get a bad rep. I just think sliding doors are an easy way to have them auto open and close, and they don't swing out, so you have to worry about getting in a tight parking space. And I hate having to worry about bumping the car next to me all the time. That comes up all the time. That's part of the reason I'm so excited for the Aptera. So that's another one. Aptera should be coming out next year, I believe, if all things go according to plan. And there's a decent chance I'll be driving down there to check out a PI build later this year. I don't know the exact month. I'm sure Aptera is going to try to build their PI builds as soon as possible. But the doors on the Aptera swing upwards. And the main body, yes, the outward mounted wheels are pretty wide, but the main body is pretty narrow. And the fact that the doors go outwards means that you're far less likely to open the door and hit the car you park next to. So I think the Aptera is going to be the most exciting one because I believe that's going to be my next vehicle. Also, the Lucid Gravity, that's entered pre-production now, so they've got vehicles built at the factory from the manufacturing line rolling off the factory floor. That's going to be a really fun one to check out. I think they've improved a lot on the Lucid Air, and I can't wait to actually drive one. It's just space efficiency to the max. I don't think you're going to be able to get a more energy efficient like SUV of that size until maybe the Tello gets there. But they're doing the truck first, so we'll have to wait on that one. But would you consider having a car without LFP battery for 20% more range and slightly faster charging? It's a hard sell at 20% more range. Well, what would that look like? Let me do the math here. So like I bought my car with 272 miles of range, If I multiply that by 1.2, that gets it to 326. So that would be about the range I would get from a long-range Model Y if I bought, which I've seen some good deals on lately, actually. I don't think I really need one because I still mostly work from home, and me and my wife fight over the car, but we have other expenses we'd rather prioritize. But um, I wouldn't pay a huge premium for it. I would say though, if I was buying a car with NMC, like 2170 cells, I would like it to have more range because I know there's going to be more degradation, and I know that I shouldn't be charging it to 100% very often. So yeah, I would say, regardless of price, if I'm buying an NMC vehicle, I need at least like 320, 330 miles of range. Like, that's the minimum. Um, I would prefer, obviously, more than that. I would think the arguments of LFP really fumble away when you start talking about 30 to 40% more range. Like, for example, like I said earlier, I wouldn't recommend the LFP Model 3 because it doesn't qualify for the federal tax credit. If you don't qualify for the federal tax credit, then buy a Model S. I don't know. You got the money, right? But let's see. 272 miles of LFP range. If we do that times 1.4, okay, it's not quite 40%. It's more like 1.3, a little more than that. So it's like, if you get the long-range rear-wheel drive Model 3, that's 360 miles of EPA range. That's like 35% more, which means, okay, even if you buy the NMC chemistry, which doesn't have as good a cycle life and you're not supposed to charge to full every day, let's just say you charge to 80% every day. It's 363 miles. 80% every day is still 290. So that's still 20 miles of rated range more than what the LFP gets on day one from the factory at 100%. Still more range. And then let's say you experience, 20% battery degradation after how many miles? That's a lot. I don't think you'd hit that very easily. It'd probably take you 100,000 miles or 200,000 miles before you start seeing 20% range loss on that battery pack. Even then, okay, charging to full gets you 290 miles. An LFP battery, even though it's higher cycle life, if you've got 100,000, 200,000 miles on it, it's not charging to 270. It's definitely not charging to 290. So I feel like, if I was in the market right now, my wife wants the hatchback. My wife is a big fan of the Model Y. I'm a big fan of smaller cars. I like more efficient cars. So I really love the Model 3. I would probably still prefer buying the rear-wheel drive long range just because it goes further than any Model Y can. And that also translates to, like, when you plug in 250 kilowatts equates to like 1,100 miles per hour, whereas you won't get quite as efficient in the Model Y. You'll get close. The rear-wheel drive long-range Model Y is still very efficient for its class, but I think people are obsessed with hatchbacks. I'm not as obsessed with them. I get they're functional and I get that they can be helpful, but I just think that people think they need them more than they really do. And the amount of storage space in the Model 3, I think, is actually quite good. If you just fold down the second row, you can fit a lot of crap back there. Only downside is it's a trunk, so you can only fit things through that little tight opening. It would, honestly, I know Tesla's talking about doing cheaper models next year. It would, honestly, I wonder how complicated it would be. This is kind of a good angle to show you what I'm talking about. Basically do what they do with the Model S. Because I don't know how long Tesla's going to keep selling the Model S. The sales for it have sunk like a rock. Move this column here back so it's more like the Model Y. It has the panoramic glass roof here. Move this column back there. You'll probably eat into your visibility a little bit, but you could make it into a hatchback. I don't think it would be that complicated of a manufacturing change to turn the Model 3 into a hatchback. But I don't know, maybe they're worrying about it Osborning Model Y sales, but I don't care. Let the Model 3 become the best seller. That would be great. If we could convince all of the country and all of the world that they should be buying more sedans instead of crossovers, then that means we get better frontal area, better aero, better efficiency. I'm all in favor of that. Let's fight the narrative that everybody needs a crossover. I'm not exactly describing a Polestar 4. A Polestar 4 is larger and less efficient, but it's a similar design characteristic, yes. Do you plan on getting a first Founders Edition Aptera? Well, I can't because I'm not on the accelerator list. I do have a lot of referral points, which I'm very grateful for, and I do intend to use them. I would feel kind of bad if everybody used my referral code when ordering an Aptera, and then I just went out and bought one anyway. So all those Aptera points would just be kind of pointless. But the main reason I don't at this time, for the record though, I have told the Aptera CEO that they should get rid of the referral program. It would hurt me, but I want Aptera to survive. So I told them, I care more about you guys securing your profit margins and sticking around than I do me getting some free vehicles or some discounts on vehicles. So I told them, like, I think you should get rid of it, and that means disqualifying me. I'm not saying get rid of everybody else's, but not mine. No, I straight up, I would pay money for an Aptera, but there's not a huge reason for me to buy one of the accelerator models, like if an accelerator took delivery and was trying to resell it. Just because I have a very good relationship with the Aptera brand, I can text those people. I do text those people actually pretty frequently, so I can check out the PI builds, which are going to be near identical to the accelerator models, really anytime I like. So I can drive them and film them, and I've even talked with Chris McCammon about potentially getting one of the PI builds for an extended period of time. So I might be able to get my hands on an Aptera and use it for like a week before first deliveries begin. So I'll get the content out of it for sure. I'm still covering it, but there's not a huge need for me to just shell out the money that early. I'd rather just wait for my referrals to go through, and then I can use those on my own personal owned one. But I do need one very quickly, and I do know there's several accelerators that used my referral code, so that means that I might get a lot of Aptera points redeemed by the time they get through the accelerator program and all that. So yeah, we'll get Aptera coverage for sure, don't worry about that. But I don't make a ton of money. I'm not like the richest YouTuber. I don't do sponsorships. So this is not like Moneybags McGee over here. I have to be somewhat price conscious. So if there's like any financial motivation for me to wait on accepting delivery, I kind of have to wait. But no, I didn't join the accelerator program, so I won't be getting like the first one off the assembly line. But I might get to drive around one for a week, which would be really fun. You would theoretically be comfortable with an EV3 long range with 370 miles range. That's the one I'm eventually going to buy. What is that, the Kia? It depends on the software. There's a lot of strings attached to that. I have not seen very promising software from Kia vehicles so far. I like their designs. Like I see a lot of EV9s actually. They're getting pretty popular around here. It's affordable. It's pretty practical. They have a decent amount of interior space. I like that it's a 3-row SUV, but the frunk is not massive on the EV9, which is kind of a downside to me. But every time I check out a Hyundai EV, it's always like, oh man, this is really efficient, or this is really cool, this looks nice. But then I play around with the software and I go, ooh, yeah, that's right. You're a legacy automaker, aren't you? So that would eat into my purchasing decision. They definitely got to have CarPlay. You actually think they'll discontinue the Model S? Well, they got to do something. I don't know if it'll be discontinued. They either got to substantially decrease the price on it, maybe start losing money on them just to move inventory. Not a lot. Like, Tesla could probably afford to lose $1,000 per Model S, and that wouldn't even hurt them because they don't sell that many of them. They could drastically lower the price of it, or they could come up with more models. Like my suggestion, I did a whole video on LFP would be perfect in the Model S, because the Model S was never going to qualify for the federal tax credit. It would have to be sub 55K, and the vehicle's too large, and with the air suspension and the more premium interior, there's just no way the Model S is going below 55K. It would eat into Model 3 sales too much anyway. So I don't think there's a chance of that happening. But maybe if they switch to a 80 kilowatt hour single motor LFP Model S, they could get the price down to $60,000, $65,000. Maybe the addressable market for it is much better. The Model S all-wheel drive can currently get close to 4 miles per kilowatt hour, maybe a little bit better. So an 80 kilowatt hour pack would give it over 300 miles of range, but with an LFP pack, you could charge it to 100% every day. So 320 miles of range when charged to full, and then the highest cycle life. Dude, an 80 kilowatt hour LFP pack is going to last for ages. Means less cycles. Same thing with those Rivians. The Rivian R1T and R1S are being made with 92 kilowatt hour LFP battery packs, which is, they're less efficient, so they won't have crazy good cycle life. But a Model S with 80 kilowatt hours, oh man, that's going to hit easily, I think, 4 miles per kilowatt hour, and you could charge it to full every day. Am I not concerned about the reliability of the Aptera? I don't know what there is to be concerned about. I mean, they're using a powertrain that's already in 1 million EVs on the road. It's very tested. It's very proven. That's the smart thing about Aptera, is there's not a lot to it. So there's not a lot of things to go wrong, really. There's only 3 wheels. There's only 2 doors, only 2 seats. They kept the manufacturing of it fairly simple. There's only 1 windshield wiper, and it uses a lot of off-the-shelf components. So I think they're testing it and being pretty smart about it. But get her a Fisker Ocean, the prices have plummeted dramatically. That I'd be more worried about. I've been watching Rich Rebuild's coverage of the Fisker Ocean, and they can't get that thing out of park. It's kind of scary. I don't know what's going to happen to those Fisker Oceans, but it's entertaining to watch. I'm not sure I'm willing to partake in it. It's kind of tempting when I've heard about some Fiskers selling for $20,000 or less than $20,000, but just knowing that there's a chance it could turn into a $15,000 brick makes me go, I know I could probably sell it for parts, but I just don't want to deal with finding buyers and having to tear it apart. It's just, I don't have that kind of time. How do Model S sales compare to Lucid Air sales? It's hard to tell because Tesla doesn't explicitly tell us how many Model S's they've sold, but they bunch in the Cybertruck with the Model X and the Model S and the Tesla Semi, actually. So there's a lot of math to figure out, but they're definitely not selling a ton of semis, so we can rule that out as margin. I think the Model X is overall more popular, at least based on registration data. And we know how many Cybertrucks they've delivered based on the recall. They issued a recall to like 12,000, all Cybertrucks, and they said that affected like 12,900 of them or something. So it left a very small percentage of sales for the Model S. And I think through some backwards math, people were able to figure out that Model S sales are basically the lowest they've ever been. Now, to be fair, Lucid Air doesn't sell at very high volume either. So I would guess they're pretty close. I would guess they're neck and neck. I think last quarter Lucid said they delivered like 2,500 Lucid Airs. I think that's a little low for the Model S. The Model S might be more at like 6,000 or 7,000, but it's hard to know exactly. Repairability of the Aptera chassis after an accident, possibly run into the R1T panel problem. Yeah, I think there's a difference between using a steel panel and a carbon fiber SMC body. There's something, Chris Anthony would be better at explaining it, but I know people have talked about body damage. The thing about the SMC carbon fiber they use is that it kind of wants to go back to its original shape. There's no paint to worry about. But yeah, I guess if you get rear-ended, well, that's the thing though, is that tail fin at the back is what occupies where most vehicles' bumper would be. So if anything, if you got rear-ended in Aptera, you'd most likely damage that little vertical rear fin. Probably not the top panel, because that's kind of higher off the ground. It depends on what you get hit by, of course. But it's early, so I expect there will probably be certain accidents that make the vehicle totaled, because it's a fairly affordable vehicle. And there are some unibody pieces that might get damaged, and it's very hard to replace the whole thing. But that's why we have insurance, and I hope, but because Aptera is right to repair, I'm sure they're going to try to make everything as repairable as possible. But if you just damage that bottom rear panel, we know that that can come off, because it's designed to come off so that you can air up or replace the rear wheel of the Aptera. So if you just damage that rear fin, I don't see that as being a terribly difficult thing to replace. I don't know. There's a bunch of variables. There's a bunch of variables that we're not going to know until it actually comes out. But um, Mike's up to 3 referrals. That's great. Awesome. Let's see. I think I answered those. Fisker Oceans are going to be treasure troves for DIYers doing those old car EV conversions. I think now is a great time for the Fisker Ocean community to kind of start working together. That's what they got to share all the information they know, which is why I'm so happy and so grateful Rich Rebuilds bought one, because they might need to start reverse engineering these things or come out with ways to update them and give them new software, which is going to be a community-based thing because the company's bankrupt. So I think my appeal towards the Model S nowadays is that nobody has one. I mean, they've been out for over a decade now, so that there's a lot of Model S's out there. There might not be as many refresh Model S's out there, but yeah, I think the fact that Tesla's offering more color options and trying to throw in more software features and perks to the Model S is a sign that they're not selling a lot of them. But what do we think about the new Ford Capri? People are mad that another iconic model name gets turned into a generic compact electric SUV. Yeah, it is kind of bland, to be honest, but I don't know. It just depends on if there's a market for it, I guess. Oh, my sorry, the person I was actually about to meet in like 10 minutes just had a family emergency. They gotta go get their let me just text them back. I'm just telling them there's no problem, like you can do what you gotta do. He's got a family member that's stranded somewhere and he's gonna have to go pick him up. Alright, I'm just telling him travel safe. Okay, we're good. We can stream longer than I thought. This is fun. I did see the Ford Capri. It looked Capri Sun. How do you... Let me remind myself. It looked like another EV everybody was talking about. I'm trying to remember which one it was. It looked like... Oh, it does look a lot like a Polestar. For those who don't know. I like the yellow, though. Yeah, it's the Blazer effect, in my opinion, which is, it might have some cool quirks and features going for it, but at least on paper, nothing about it seemed particularly exciting. It seemed like average range, average charging, average interior. It's not a screaming good price. It's a fine price, but yeah, there's a lot of EVs that come out now, and it's like, I can't have an opinion on all of them because a lot of them are just like, meh. But yeah, it does look like a Polestar 2. But my biggest problem with the Polestar 2 is not the exterior styling, but more so the interior space efficiency. So I haven't seen the inside of the Capri, but maybe it's good. I don't know. I like that Ford wants to double down on CarPlay, but Polestar is doing so as well. So driveway goals: Cybertruck, Aptera, Lit Motors, AEV, Tello. Wow, that's going to be quite a driveway. It will do well in Europe. I hope so. I hope they can find a market for it, because that's what, we need as many options as possible so that there's something for everybody out there who wants an EV. A lot of people don't want to buy from startups, or they don't like cars that are too minimal, that get rid of all their buttons. So I suppose it's a good thing for legacy automakers to kind of diversify and have more options. But the old Capri used to be a 2-door affordable sports car known for rally. Yeah, the first time I looked up the Capri, that's what it showed. But yeah, crossovers, they're a popular segment. That's why everybody makes them. They sell well. It's a shame. I wish just somebody... Aptera is basically the first one. Somebody needs to just bite the bullet and accept that, hey, some of us might just want a sporty 2-seater EV. It doesn't necessarily have to be the cheapest thing in the world, but just a more efficient, smaller, 2-seater. That would be enough for a lot of us. Oh, here goes the internet again. Sorry for the bit rate. Sometimes T-Mobile gets fussy. Let's see. Do I think that the larger 4-wheeled next-gen Aptera would still have wheels separate from the body in nacelle? I don't know how to say that. Nacelles. like the three-wheeled version? No, I don't. Hopefully the stream, man, bitrate's jumping all over the place. Slowly it is recovering. Sorry for the pixelation, but my internet tripping. It's going like this. It's crazy. I can see the bitrate in OBS. In 1 second, it goes way down to 200, so I look super pixelated, and then it goes back up to 5,000, in which it looks fine. So just give it a minute. Give it a minute to stabilize. But I don't think that the four-wheeled Aptera will have outward-mounted wheels. I think the outward-mounted wheel design makes sense for an autocycle. It makes sense for that platform, but Jason Hill kind of answered that when there were the leaked renders. I don't know if they were intentional or not, but Aptera had some renders that got shared around of what their other higher occupancy models would look like. And if you're making a four-wheeled vehicle, I don't believe the outward-mounted wheels is the most efficient way to do it. That's when it starts to make more sense to keep the wheels more inboard and a bit more traditional car-like. But all that to be said, they are still very, very focused on their three-wheeled vehicle. They still believe that's going to be, their main bestseller. Like, that's what their main advantages speak to, like the affordability of it, the efficiency of it, and there's a lot of people that are just driving around with one or two people in the car. So similar to Chris McCammon, I could probably do 80 to 90% of my driving in the Aptera, and then I would just need the Model 3 or some other car whenever I need to move more people or I need more storage space, which isn't that often, to be honest. Old Capri used to be... Oh, I read that, sorry. A lot of the EVs on the road now will still be on the road in 30 and 40 years. EV batteries will last a lot longer than we think, especially because software around temperature management can get better. I hope so. Yeah, I'm hoping that I still see, man, come on, bitrate. What's wrong with you? You were doing so great for like an hour. Now you're conking out on me. Do I need to move it again? I gotta move it over here? Is that gonna make it worse? I still see early Model S's. It's still pretty common sight for me to see 2014 or 2013 Model S's driving around. So I don't know if they're on the original battery packs, but yeah, there's been a lot of advancements in drivetrain efficiency and battery pack efficiency. So hopefully those trends continue. And let's see. Interesting thing about LFP versus NMC is that even though LFP is cheaper, it's far more sensitive to price changes in lithium because they contain a lot more lithium than NMC cells. So when we get domestic lithium refining, LFP cell prices will probably crash a lot. Yeah, and I think that they are working on that. They have purchased manufacturing equipment from CATL, which should allow them to build LFPs domestically, which I think would be the best case scenario. If you could make LFP batteries that also qualified for the federal tax credit, and then, like you said, also relied on domestic lithium refinery, oh man, we could get price per kilowatt hour substantially lower than what it is today, which is why I still think that LFP is probably the future, not NMC. I think NMC is mostly going to be needed for higher range, higher towing, so like trucks, basically. Semi-trucks, airplanes especially, who are trying to go electric, or pickup trucks that are doing long-distance towing. That's when the nickel, manganese, cobalt chemistry is going to be the most practical. But I think for a lot of sedans and even crossovers out there, eventually LFP is going to make the most amount of sense. Outward-mounted wheels just seems like a design motif that should be shared on all Apteras, even if when they make the other vehicles. I think efficiency is what drives them the most, so efficiency is going to be their main priority. So they're going to do whatever makes the most aerodynamic sense or makes the most efficiency sense. And I think there's probably a lot of... what do you call it, outsourced manufacturing they could rely on if they made a more traditional sedan or crossover type vehicle, because then Aptera really just has to work on the outward body. If you're making a traditional four-wheeled vehicle, then you could rely on a third-party automaker to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And then Aptera just comes in and does the design for the interior to make it as simple and streamlined or as efficient as possible. And then Aptera comes in with their body panels and they make it as aero as possible, and then they cover it in solar cells, and then boom. For path to market, you could probably do it much, much cheaper if you relied more on a traditional manufacturing process. But have I seen the Renault 5? What do you think about this quirky, funky French car? I haven't. Should I look it up? Let's see. Renault 5. Oh, it looks like an R3. It's kind of like an R3. Yeah, I haven't read much about it. I don't know if it's coming to the US, but I like how small it is. I'm a fan of small vehicles. For those who don't know, that's kind of what it looks like. It does very much remind me of the R3, though. E-Tech Electric sells like hotcakes. Good things come in small packages. I agree. Yeah. No, I need to research that more. I don't know if it's a U.S. thing. I think Renault is more China or Europe, or I forget. But anyway, it looks cool. I need to do some more research on it. But first impressions are good. I love small cars. That's why I bought the smallest Tesla I could. You hear about BYD here in Canada. They've partnered for lobbying here and reportedly have started sniffing around for a dealer network. And BYD with manufacturer plates was spotted too. I have not heard about that, but it would be interesting to actually get some BYD vehicles in North America. You could probably drive them from Canada into the U.S. What's interesting is Canada is likely going to match whatever the charging standard is in the U.S. So if the U.S. goes all NACS and Canada goes all NACS, would BYD have to make EVs with NACS? That would be kind of interesting. Then people might start buying them up there and bringing them down here because they're going to be cheap. But BYD has expressed that they have no plans to enter the U.S. because it's a very messy market because of all the import fees. And whoever wins the election, BYD is probably not going to be favored by either party. So I don't think there's a high likelihood that we're going to get it in the U.S. But BYD does make some cheap cars. More affordable vehicles, pretty good hardware. The reviews, I haven't watched a lot, obviously, because, I can't drive them here, so I don't have a ton of interest in them. But the reviews I have seen of the BYD is that good hardware, but lacking good software, which is kind of important to me. I really like good software. Canada's current charging is awful, worse than the U.S. Really? Well, I've seen a lot of superchargers go up there, but it's definitely not a very highly populated area, which is why it usually gets put on the back burner for EV charging. Will you ever do a deep dive into electric unicycles, since they are by far the most efficient EVs that exist? I don't know. Something about unicycles just make me think of the circus. Oh, brother. No, I think what I've kind of learned from that video talking about lit motors and the C1, the self-balancing motorcycle, is that if the vehicle cannot balance itself passively, the efficiency argument doesn't hold up as well, because we really don't know at decent driving speed how much energy those gyros actually use. The gyroscopes have to be constantly moving and tilting in order to keep the vehicle upright, and that's got to eat into your energy consumption. So even though it's a small frontal area and you can make it aerodynamic and all that, if every time it stops it has to keep spinning something, it's not necessarily going to be as efficient as can be, which is why, honestly, I did a lot of research. I watched a lot of videos and I read a lot of articles about lit motors when I did that video on them. And kind of the conclusion that I described in that video is what it taught me is that you can't really get much more efficient than an Aptera without making some giant compromise in functionality. Like, obviously an e-bike is very efficient. It's super efficient. People are like, oh, on my e-bike I can get 100 miles per kilowatt hour. It's like, okay, but you don't even have 1 kilowatt hour. Like, you're not and it's a bike, you got to pedal it, you got to wear a helmet, it can't go that fast, so it's not even highway capable. An Aptera is capable of going like hundreds of miles on a charge. and it's enclosed, so you can drive it in bad weather, and you can have HVAC controls and that kind of thing. So as far as a high range enclosed vehicle that can still be safe, that can still have airbags and crumple zones and stuff like that, impact protection, an Aptera is pretty much as efficient as you can get. Once you start removing more wheels, all of the energy is lost to balancing the vehicle or wind resistance. If you get rid of those gyros and you just say, well, I'll balance the vehicle myself, well, now you're talking about a traditional motorcycle, and then your wind resistance is going to be quite high. And that's why electric motorcycles like the Livewire or the electric Zeros, they don't usually exceed 10 miles per kilowatt hour. Maybe on a good day they could hit 11, but it's most of the time they don't, and usually not, definitely not at highway speed. Whereas the Aptera, because it's so aerodynamic and because it's large enough to accommodate for solar cells, a lot of its energy is free. Whereas the Lit Motors C1 vehicle, even at 14 miles per kilowatt hour, you have to pay for every kilowatt hour. Whereas the Aptera could get, 3, maybe 4 kilowatt hours a day for free, which stacks up after a while. BYD has an entire South American and Central American market to chomp on and digest before trying to come to the U.S. See, that's the funny thing is, like, Elon backed out on Giga Mexico. Now it doesn't sound like they want to do it if Trump wins. And yet Dave Lee was talking to executives way back at Tesla Investor Day, and he said that the point of Giga Mexico was not to build vehicles for the U.S. He said Giga Mexico was to make vehicles for the South American and Central American markets. But now Elon's saying, oh, well, if there's import fees from Giga Mexico, we don't want it. It's like, oh. Well, I guess I'm confused on what the point of Giga Mexico was, but maybe Dave Lee got bad info. I don't know. But at this point, it sounds like Giga Mexico isn't happening, which is a shame because I want more Gigafactories. I don't really care where they are. Just scaling up more EV production is what we need more of. And I guess interest rates and people's hesitancy towards something they don't know very much is slowing EV adoption more, and so it's slowing Tesla's desire to build more factories. But the most efficient vehicle per person is a high-speed train. Well, yeah, but a train never gets you to your end destination. A train requires you to get to a train station, and then you arrive at another train station. It's very efficient, but it's not the end-all be-all. Even countries that have amazing train infrastructure, you still need a car to get to and from, and there's a lot more versatility with a car of like storage and car camping or driving to specific places you want to get to. What color should Tesla add next to their sexy lineup? Well, I really like what they've got. The Quicksilver and Ultra Red is fantastic, but I wouldn't mind like a electric. I've seen some really good bright yellows. I don't know. Mike really liked Compass Yellow. I kind of like it too when I see it. I don't know. I've seen some bright yellow Tesla wraps that I thought looked pretty good. Like someone, maybe it's just because of this Renault 5 I saw. This is a good color. I don't know. It's a little spicy. I don't know. Something about green doesn't quite pop the same way. And it's just a little on the nose. Like, it's a green EV. Green Leaf, right? Like, there's too much association with green in electric. So, I don't know. Yellow's cool. Polestar has a lot of those yellow accents where they have like the yellow seat belts or the yellow brake calipers. Those look cool to me. Said it has a pretty big charging indicator on the bonnet. Do you think we can expect more cars in the future with a quirk like that to differentiate? I don't know about big quirks, but I think it'll come down for a lot of people to charging infrastructure and software, which is, I think, some of Rivian's big advantages. That, like, Rivian has a charger network that they're building out themselves, and they were one of the first to gain access to the supercharger network. And Rivian has spent a lot of money wisely on their software and their zonal architecture, which is why Volkswagen is partnering with them for their vehicles. The gold Starlight Polestar color looks amazing to me. It's probably the kind of thing I need to see in person. Compared to the USA, trains and buses are so good that people don't need a car anymore, saving them tons of money. In major cities, but even countries with great train infrastructure still sell hundreds of thousands of cars every year. So Yeah, it's great if you can get by without one, but there hasn't been much data that suggests car sales drop to zero if you have good enough trains. There's like, I love trains. I've taken cross country train trips, and I think trains are cool. I played with trains when I was growing up. I'm a big fan of trains, but I do not believe they replace demand for cars. There's not much evidence of that. Um, I haven't seen much proof of that, at least. Um, and especially in different countries, it's a cultural thing. It's not just an infrastructure thing. Like, some people want more privacy. Or some people want to drive to the beach, or they want to drive to the woods, they want to drive to the campsite, or they want to go off-roading. There's all kinds of stuff embedded in car culture. It's people use cars for a lot more than just transportation. Like, the best-selling vehicles would not be F-150s and Toyota RAV4s if all people need was a seat that moved them around. If all they needed was a cheap seat that moved them around, everybody would be buying Toyota Corollas and Honda Civics from 10 years ago. But those aren't the best sellers. It's the SUVs, it's the crossovers. People want to have a car seat. People want to have space so that they can bring their strollers around, walk around in a park. Well, it's based on a lot of preferences, yeah. But the double-edged sword of that is to get to a place where public transportation truly can fill all your car needs. You typically have to live in a more populated area. You got to live closer to the train station, closer to the bus station, and then to live in a more highly populated area, typically living costs go up because there's more people, there's more options, so landlords can charge more for rent, or because it's such a populated area, you can't afford to buy a house, so now you're forced to pay for rent because you can't get approved for a mortgage. So while you may save, $300, $400 a month by not owning a car, you're spending twice as much on rent. So there's all kinds of pros and cons to that. So that's why in the bio of Tailosive EV, I made a point to say, we love efficient, affordable, independent transportation. Independent meaning you can go when you want, how you want, where you want, and not have to abide by a bus schedule or a train schedule. I'm all in favor of more public transport. I want more public transport for everybody, but there's not a lot of it in much of the world, and even the places that has it, there's still people buying cars. And most of it is not a very productive conversation, at least on YouTube. It just results in everybody going, well, we should spend more of, the government should do something. Yeah, okay, you can expect the government to do all kinds of stupid things. And there's all kinds of great ideas that the government won't do, which is why I've never been that entertained or interested in the public transportation topic. It's very blatant and very obvious. Yeah, we need more of it. Okay, what else do you want to talk about? We're not going to get it, though, because governments are stupid and they make bad decisions all the time. Same thing with nuclear power. We need more nuclear power. Why aren't we investing more in nuclear power? I don't know. Government's stupid. Yeah. I don't want to become the let's complain about the government channel. That's why I like talking about EVs. Getting trains that no one rides that go to nowhere. Yeah, that's a problem too. Some people just love cars, so they buy them for that reason, but the USA, we're forced to buy them even if you don't want to. I would argue even if you had great public transportation everywhere, people would still buy cars. But people aren't buying cars because they are forced to most of the time. I think most people are buying cars. And at least the people who are forced to buy cars are not spending an insane amount on them. Like, if you're just trying to find the cheapest vehicle, period, you can buy that gets you from point A to point B, because that's really all a bus can do. A bus isn't a great option for a road trip to see your family, or if you want to go to the beach, or if you want to go up into the woods and go camping. You're not going to haul all of your surfboards on the bus. You're not going to haul all of your firewood and camping gear on the bus. Your whole family on the bus. You need car seats now, or you're going to hold the kid the whole time with strangers. No, there's a lot of people that would still choose to buy a car. And we see that as proof in other countries that have great public transportation. It can reduce the amount of miles you put on your car, for sure, but it doesn't stop the fact that people buy cars. I really appreciated the last vid you did a while ago about common criticisms people make about EVs, debunking common myths, that kind of thing. Any plans to do another vid like that? The problem is the people who watch those videos are not the people who should be. You're only going to watch that if you're a fan of EVs. And if you're not a fan of EVs, you're not going to watch it. That's why I tend to think that it's kind of pointless to try to fight or debunk EV myths. Like, I've done videos on it, but not a lot of people watch them, is because it's like, people are going to believe what they want to believe. If If they're convinced that they don't need an EV, it doesn't matter. You can't talk that person into needing one or wanting one. I don't think you can argue someone into saying, oh, all of the things you've read online are wrong. All the things you believe are wrong. Just believe all the things I've said and then you'll buy one. I've never seen someone go electric by doing that. I think the best way to convince people to buy EVs is to just buy them yourself and have a good time and share your positive experience. That's what I try to do on this channel. Is just like, here's what I got. Here's what it's good at. And just be honest. It doesn't mean lie and say that things are good when they're not, which is why I share the negative stories too. But I think that has convinced more people to switch to an EV than others, more than any other tactic, is to just let the people who want EVs own them, drive them, talk about how great they are and how much they like driving them. Basically, try to make people jealous. You'll have a much easier time converting someone to an EV if they're interested in switching. If they're not interested in switching and you're trying to talk them into switching, they'll be a lot more hesitant because they don't like change. They're more likely to be interested in an EV if they quit. No, not quit. If they start having more and more annoyances with their gas car, and then they look online or they look around in their personal life and start seeing lots of people enjoying their EV and not having the same issues of those gas car. Like, oh my God, have you seen these gas prices? They're insane. Or, oh my God, I had another transmission failure. Another head gasket blew out. Oh, I got to change my oil again. Oh, I need new brake pads. And then you see all of your friends driving around in EVs. It's that kind of environmental switch that I think impacts people more than, why don't you want an EV? Oh, because they catch on fire. No, they don't. The NHTSA says that an EV... It's like, you're right. You could have the data. You could have the facts. But if you come at it with a attack point of view or I'm going to convince you, they're not going to be as interested. It is absolutely necessary. You can definitely go camping using public transport, not in the U.S. Well, not in a lot of countries. It depends on where you want to go camping. But again, the end result of that debate is just this. This is all it is. That's why it's not interesting to me. It all falls back to government bad. Government should do more. I know government's bad. I know the government makes dumb ideas all the time. It's just not fun for me to dwell on that because it doesn't get anywhere. We just need to vote for the people that are going to prioritize. Yeah, good luck. Just gives you the illusion of control. EV naysayers might be the most ignorant bunch on the planet. It's true, and I also just don't think it's worth our time. Like, personally, I will be perfectly happy in my life if gas cars are sold for the rest of my living years. I would be fine with that. As long as I can have EVs and Tesla continues to try to make them better, and other EV companies like Aptera or Rivian or Lucid or whoever keeps trying to make EVs better and better, and they find a market for them, that's great. I'm only going to be very frustrated and upset if there's no more EVs or very few EVs and the charging infrastructure starts shutting down. That would be very frustrating and sad. But as long as I got mine, I'm fine. I don't need everybody to buy what I buy. That's not a necessary thing for me. I mean, sure, it would be nice if there were no gas cars on the road because then I wouldn't hear them revving and then there wouldn't be as much pollution in the atmosphere, yada, yada, yada. So there's all kinds of advantages that would come from that, but I would be content as long as I get my EVs, I'll get my Aptera, I'll drive around my Tello, I'll drive around whatever I like. If you want to keep driving around your gas vehicle and pay for oil changes and transmission failure and have all these problems with the combustion engine and oil leaks and new brake pads, if you want to keep paying for all that, by all means, go for it. Do your thing. I don't got any problem with you buying what you want to buy, but I don't see much point in trying to convince people that they shouldn't buy what they want to buy. It's always about bashing EVs. I got my Y last month and I'm loving it. Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I know. I've watched Not Just Bikes before. But I don't completely agree with everything I've heard him say. He brings up a lot of good points about how bad city planning is, but I think that there's a lot of applications for cars. It's a freedom thing at the end of the day. Cars are a symbol of freedom. That's why they're probably so popular and there's such a culture for them in America. But it's not just America. There's a ton of car culture and car sales in Germany and in Europe and Asia now as well. There's a bunch of automakers in China. Around the world, it's a very common thing that people want a way to own a vehicle that's their style or drives the way they like or has the storage space that they like and can go off-road and can go where they want, and they don't have to abide by some kind of schedule. They don't have to abide by some kind of bus schedule. They don't have to share cabin space with other people. They want privacy. Like I can have all kinds of personal, detailed, intimate conversations with my friend, with my family, or with my wife in the car that I just could not have on a bus, or I could not have on a train. It would just be much, much harder. I'd have to be really quiet. I'd have to whisper. Or if I want to listen to music, now I got to put in headphones. And now I can't talk to my wife as easily, whereas I can play whatever music I want in the car and still talk as loud as I want with my friend and family member about whatever topic I feel comfortable with. And I don't have to worry about if someone gets on the bus and they're sneezing and coughing or they're smoking and they're not supposed to. There's all kinds of things about a public place and a privately owned place. And public transport is just that by definition. It is public. And when you're in a public place, people don't treat the environment as nicely as they treat a privately owned place, or to the liking of what you would prefer. Like I got air fresheners in my car, or I like the temperature a certain way. And in a train, it could be colder than I like, or warmer than I like, or it could be stinkier than I like, or it could be more crowded than I like, or the pricing of it could fluctuate more than I like. Where, last year the train was this much, now it's gone up to this much. Whereas with a vehicle, at least with an EV, especially one like Aptera, you can just decide, hey, I'm charging what I want to charge. Here's the price. If I get solar, I don't have to pay for electricity anymore. It's more independent. It's more on my own. There's just a fundamental difference in practicality, in my opinion. Cars are used for much, much more than transportation. I'm all in favor of more public transport. I just don't see it as a replacement. Let's see. I can't wait for there to be more EVs than ICE, and I wonder if EV haters still going to hate and misinform people. Probably. We probably have that for the rest of time. I got some family members telling me not to go EV. I work for Ford Motor Company. I'm definitely getting a Mustang Mach-E all-wheel drive extended range. Nice. I hope you like it. That's a fun EV. I've driven it myself. Let's see. You need to revive your gaming channel. Me, you, and Kaz could do a Tesla YouTubers play. You could do it on your channel. I don't need my own. I can't wait for Aptera to come out with that 250-mile range variant. I'm honestly curious if they could go lower. I think for a lot of people, the Aptera will be like the perfect commuter, in which case 250 miles is probably overkill. Here's the crazy thing about that. Like, Chris Anthony talked about this, so I know I'm allowed to talk about it, but he mentioned in our interview and when we talked to him in person, like, down the road, they might be interested in doing like a super small battery pack in the Aptera, like 18 kilowatt hours, which theoretically would give it 180 miles of range. And that could allow them to really lower the price of the battery. And for a commuter, I think 180 miles of range is plenty. Plus, it would be super lightweight, super efficient. The downside of that is you would probably add a ton of cycles to the battery fairly quickly. I mean, hopefully you're not taking it on a ton of road trips, but now, similar to like we talked about earlier with those standard range Model 3s, the degradation is going to be a lot more noticeable. But the crazy thing about that is that an 18 kilowatt hour battery pack, by the time they make it, is probably going to be in the ballpark of like maybe $3,000. So even when the cycle life gets really, really high and you need to replace it, it could just be a $2,000 or $3,000 replacement because of how small that battery pack is. It would be closer in line to like the price of replacing a Prius battery instead of like a Tesla giant battery, Being dependent only on your car because public transport is crap is not freedom, a common misconception. No, I don't agree with that. I don't see myself as dependent on my car. I like my car. It's like me saying you're dependent on your smartphone. We need public smartphones so that you don't have to go out and buy a phone, or we need public housing, so we need to have the government pay for all of my housing so that I am not burdened by having to take care of myself. Nah, I think there's some independence involved. People like these things. We're not just buying them to cover the needs of getting me from here to there. There's a lot more to it than that. There's the privacy element, there's the safety element, there's the independence element, of leaving when I want, going when people like to go places. And people are happy to pay a price. That's why the cheapest cars aren't the best-selling cars. If it was true that we purely needed cars just to put our butt in a seat and move from point A to point B, then the cheapest car would be the best-selling car. Yet the Model Y is the best-selling car. It's definitely not the cheapest, but people like to go fast. People like to have storage capacity. People like to have roof racks. People like to be able to move things around. I don't want to... If I'm like... Classic example. This happened just like 2 days ago. If my wife is baking a bunch of stuff, like she's baking... what was it? It was like cookies or brownies. Or we're bringing it to a family event or a party. She likes having a way to load up all of the groceries, or we're bringing clothes we're going to donate, or we're going to bring groceries back. We like being able to haul all of that stuff so that we don't have to go, oh, I do one train trip and I have to hold the brownies the entire bus ride or the entire train ride. No, she wants to be able to put them down somewhere and not worry about them sliding around all over the place. You take them on a public bus. Where? You're going to put them on the floor? You're going to put them on a rack up there? Now they're going to slide around in the rack? No. You know, I've taken public transport. I used it for going to college. Very handy, very affordable. It was free. I was able to get free rides to college. Never at any point have I ridden a public bus or a public train and thought, wow, I don't need a car anymore. My point is, public transport serves one need, cars serve a different need. So I don't believe we should be mixing the two and acting like one replaces the other. I'm not going around saying, hey, if we get enough robo-taxis out there, we can get rid of all buses and trains. I'm not advocating for that. Buses and trains are handy. There's an application for them that's useful and practical for people who are visiting or people who are traveling or whatever. I love train rides. I'd love to do another one. But it's funny to me that there's a lot of people that are still convinced that, oh, if we just get trains and buses practical enough, then we'll just get rid of all the cars. And it's like, no, I don't think so. Mike in the Woods says 18 kilowatt hours sodium ion battery. Let's go. Yeah, I don't think they're that interested in doing sodium ion yet just because of the cycle life. But have you had better experience with yours? Mike says it costs more to take the train than a car, not accounting for repairs in the Bay Area, thanks to price gouging by Caltrain Amtrak. That's ironic. Yeah, I was going to say, I've read in Europe, actually, oftentimes, well, not just in Europe, actually in the U.S. as well, traveling by train is more expensive than traveling by air because of competition. You can only lay so many railroads. And that means that you can only have so many trains on those railroads. Whereas you can have a bunch of flights. There's a lot of space in the atmosphere for options for which airline do I want to go with to get to this destination. You could have Delta have one price, United have another price, and Southwest have another price. And they could all be going to the exact same places. But they all try to be price competitive by, oh, well, we offer more checked bags, or we offer more this, or we offer more this. When you have more competition, same thing in the automotive space. Rivian prioritizes the off-roading or the storage space, or Tesla prioritizes the autonomy. All of them can achieve similar goals, but when they prioritize different things and there's competition, you get price wars with each other. You get motivations for prices to be lower, whereas in Europe or Asia or wherever, when you only have a finite number of railroads, you can only really have one or two train companies. So they're not motivated, or they're not really incentivized to lower prices by that much, because they'll charge what they want to charge. So you can scale up and have a lot of different car options, but you can't have a ton of train options. Get some of your points. I'm not saying people should stop using cars 100% of the time. Well, that's my point, is like, well, if cars are still going to be used, we're still going to need more efficient ones. So that's why we're talking about EVs here. Plum says, I think he meant is that having a car shouldn't be the only practical mode of transport. You can have your car all you want. It shouldn't necessarily be required. I agree, which is why I've never poo-pooed public transport. I've never said, like, it shouldn't exist or we shouldn't have it. However, there have been a lot of people suggesting that we can get rid of car ownership if we have enough public, which is where I disagree. If someone doesn't want to own a car and just wants to use public transport, I totally agree. We're on the same page on that. They should have the option, but there's not much we can do to make that happen. There's EV brands that we can support if we want to have more efficient EVs that we can talk about and share more about and get the word out about for more efficient ones like Aptera or Tello. You know, there's things we can do as a community. We can choose to buy an EV that suits our needs. But what can we do if you're like, I want more public transport and there isn't much in my area? So what do we go? Oh yeah, there should be. Most of the time, from what I've discovered, if you move to a place that has really good public transport, your cost of living is going to be twice as much because the rent is higher and you can't buy a house. So, hello, Martin. Welcome back. I don't think cars should be mandatory. My point is, even in places where cars aren't mandatory, people still buy them, people still use them, which is why the need for more efficient vehicles is still very relevant, still very present. And that's what I want to focus on because that's something we can actively change. We can educate people, or we can spread the word online or in person about more efficient EVs that are coming out. And it's also a very educational experience to learn about why EVs don't have the same great range as gas cars for the same low price. It has to do with battery packs and energy density, and I think there's a lot of value and a lot to be said about making more efficient vehicles, and I think that's something we should prioritize and talk more about. And I've just had too many talks where I try to talk about it and go, yeah, we don't need that. What we need is more public transport. And I'm like, yeah, that's a separate problem that we're not going to get fixed because it depends on the government doing something smart. So I don't want to be the shake fist at the government channel because there's a lot of those. We don't need more of those. HG said, sold my 2018 long-range rear-wheel drive Model 3 at 60,000 miles. Second owner still has it and going strong at 124,000 miles. That's awesome. Nice. I'm glad to hear those kinds of stories. Fred215 says, one pedal driving is game-changing and makes driving so much smoother. Absolutely. Probably the most dangerous thing about it is going back to a car that doesn't have it. It's like, oh, crap, I got to use the brakes. But also just regenerative braking as a whole is such a genius technology. It doesn't get enough credit. The fact that, like, tomorrow I'm going to be visiting some friends. They just had a baby and we're delivering dinner for them so they don't have to worry about dinner. And they live up much higher altitude than we do. So we're going to be driving for a bit to go way up high, and we're going to use a lot of energy in that process. But the fact that on the way home, I'll basically use no energy, I get like a free trip electricity-wise because of the regen I get on the way home. Like, that just doesn't happen in a gas vehicle. Or really a train or a bus, to be honest. As we get some more regenerative braking in the buses, but yeah, again, classic example. I'm driving to my friend's house, which is much higher altitude, and we also have to leave pretty much exactly when my wife gets out of work. So if I had to abide by some bus schedule, it definitely wouldn't work. So I got to pick her up. We're going to drive to a restaurant. We're going to have to order the food there at the restaurant. Whereas a bus, I don't know if it would have stopped there. With the bus, I would have to stop wherever the bus stop was closest to the restaurant, get off the bus. The bus isn't going to wait for me. I have to order the food, wait for the food to get ready, get the food, get back on the bus, hold the food, or put the food on the sticky floor, or put it above me, or wait for another bus to come to the bus stop, adding to the overall trip time, and then hope that bus goes close to my friend's house and then walk to my friend's house. Or I could just drive my car to the restaurant, pick up the food, put the food in the frunk or a place where it won't slide around too much, and then drive to my friend's house. Much, much simpler. I know it's not free energy, but my point is I would be using fuel and wearing out brake pads had I done this driving a gas car. I'm not gaining any fuel. And I would have used a lot of fuel going up that hill. Regardless of going uphill, in an electric or gas car, you're going to use more energy. The difference is in an EV, going back down that hill, I'm getting a lot more of that energy back. I'm not getting that energy back in the gas car. Will gas cars add regenerative braking anytime soon? I mean, hybrids have them. Hybrids have a battery that they can accept that energy in, but because that battery pack tends to be much smaller, they typically can't regen as long as a full EV can. Would like if they would like it if they made the new Model Y to be more boxy, so more practical. You basically just described the Rivian R2. More boxy means less efficient, less range. I don't know if you want less range. Is less range more practical? I don't know. Mike says, definitely got to be more attentive when switching to a non-one-pedal driving vehicle. For me, it's more dangerous since that non-one-pedal driving vehicle is a full-size truck. Yeah, you got to be careful, dude. What happens in a gas car is instead of gaining fuel, you degrade brake pads. Pretty much. Degenerative braking. It's going to be so game-changing with the semi and other cargo vehicles. Oh, it's a huge game-changer with the semi. Because that's one of the biggest problems with traditional diesel semi trucks is the brake pads overheat. They're so heavy, there's so much mass, and on these downhill stretches they have to build entire runaway ramps. You see them all over I-5, especially through the Grapevine, but you also see them up north as well where I drive. You'll go through these huge downhill stretches and they have to build turnouts for the semi trucks because they can have brake failure. And then they can't stop because the brakes overheat and then they stop working. So you have to drive it off the road and go up this big gravel and just hope that the inertia stops you in time. It's extremely dangerous. Whereas now, with these all-electric semis, they just recharge the battery. Instead of getting hot and creating brake dust and wearing out the vehicle, it straight up puts energy back into the battery pack. It's super useful. It's super helpful. Or order the food to your house. Yeah, how are they going to deliver it? With a car. And they're going to charge more because now they have to pay an employee to drive that car to that house. Also, not every restaurant, at least where I live, not every restaurant has food delivery. I ain't paying for DoorDash. I can pick that crap up myself. No, thank you. I'm stoked about the Semi factory being built into Nevada. Can't come fast enough. I agree that Tesla Semi is one of the more exciting products they've got going on. I think there's way too much time and vocal attention that goes to the Tesla bot, which is still technically a theory. Haven't delivered anything. And then way too much talk going towards robo-taxis, even though we can't make a vehicle that even does what a Waymo does in regards to autonomy. You still need a driver. You still need to keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. Now they're slowly starting to let you take your hands on off the wheel, but they still need your eyes to be on the road. Whereas a Waymo, you can literally just get in the back. And I know it's geo-fenced versus generalized, but still, I'm like, hey, Waymo's got over 2 million miles clocked without a driver now. Tesla's got 0. That's becoming harder and harder for them to leapfrog. Boxy design equals worse efficiency, not practical, but more space in the boot practical. Silver lining to everything. Right. Which is why I think it's good to have companies doing both. Rivian's going more boxy. Tesla's going more rounded off, more efficient. You buy the one that prioritizes your feature more. So if you want more boxy, you go Rivian. If you want more tapered off, you go Tesla. That's the beauty of the free market. We have competition. You're not going to have much competition with buses and trains, though. Sorry. Now I am throwing public transport under the bus. I'm in the camp of the bot being further along than the robotaxi, just an easier problem to solve because of the stakes. No one dies if the bot gets confused on which hole to put the rod in. I just feel like the bot is infinitely more complex because there's an infinite number of tasks it needs to do. There's probably some few basic tasks it could do, but it's not going to be a very wide addressable market with its capabilities, in my opinion. because Elon just sees everything as the sky's the limit. He's just like, oh yeah, with enough training, the bot can do anything a human can do. And I'm like, I think the bot will do the kind of things the Boston Dynamics robot can do, so that there will be a few limited, again, I think Elon gets really pumped and really excited about certain ideas, and then he gets distracted, and then he gets focused on something else, and then he'll abandon the idea. The Boring Company is a classic example. Like, when he first introduced the Boring Company to the world, he was like, this is going to solve traffic. We're just going to find a way to lower the price of digging tunnels, and we're going to dig tunnels everywhere, and then there will be no more traffic because you'll just drive wherever you need to drive, and you can go underground, and no traffic because there will be millions and millions of miles worth of tunnels. That was the idea, because Elon's a big picture thinker, and he's very ambitious, and he's an optimistic guy. You don't attempt the things he's attempted without being super ambitious and super optimistic. So you kind of need that crazy element of Elon to get where Tesla is today. And I still personally believe we wouldn't have Rivian, we wouldn't have Lucid, we wouldn't have Aptera if it weren't for Tesla showing the world what EVs can be, because that really proved to the investment community that EVs are viable and they can be profitable. Before Tesla, that was not even a consideration for most companies. It was like, what? EV? Who would buy that? It was, but similar to the Boring Company, Elon can get a huge big picture idea and think, oh, we just need to develop the tunnels enough and then we'll fix traffic problems. And that was like 2016, 2017 maybe. So it's been 7 years later. It's been a while. And what is the Boring Company now? They've dug, what, a couple miles in Las Vegas? And it works. They delivered it. It's used by the Las Vegas network. But has it solved traffic? Not really, because we've seen how difficult it is to scale that system. And we've also found out it has its own built-in advantages, because you can just cram a bunch of cars in the tunnel, and now you've got traffic underground and above ground. So it wasn't as... the Boring Company is still scaling up and iterating. Exactly. And you could have the exact same problem with the bot and the robotaxi for decades. In the same way that I don't think the Boring Company is going to solve traffic, I think you could deliver the robotaxi in extremely limited volumes, and it might not be as scalable or as profitable as he thinks it is. I would love to be proven wrong. Plum Carton says Tesla bot auto taxi is a dead-end hype. It's just, I don't understand how people can be excited about it for this long. Like, they were literally saying 1 million robotaxis by the end of 2020, and we're halfway through 2024. I'm like, how many years do you want to keep waiting on this? And I don't know, even if it all went according to plan, I don't find it that exciting, I guess. That's why I have a hard time getting pumped by it. It's like, what if a robotaxi just came and picked you up? Again, for all the same reasons I explained as to why car ownership I don't think is going to go away. Like, people like owning their own vehicle. It's not just a matter of price. It's like, yeah, even with totally free public transport, I still think people would still buy cars. In the same way, even with robotaxis, I still think people would want to own their own car. There's just too many use cases where it's like, I want my own vehicle, or I don't want to have to pay surge pricing, or I don't want to have to move car seats in and out of the car every time I pick it up and I need to move my kids around. Or I just feel uncomfortable in it, or if it gets a flat tire, now I'm just stuck, or that kind of thing. So I don't see the grand end vision of a bunch of robo-taxis driving all of us around as very interesting. It's like, great, so now instead of a bus, we all just ride around in minibuses, and it's going to stink, and it's going to smell, and it's not going to be the same preferences that I like having with my traditional vehicle when it comes to legroom or climate control or music. All that stuff changes every time you get in. Yeah, like, I agree. Like MKBHD said, buy the product for what it is now, not for what it could eventually become. Absolutely. At this point, I love this car after 50,000 miles because of what it was when I took delivery of it. If there has been software updates that have made it better, and I'm grateful for those, but everything in regards to autonomy has been a disappointment. Don't discount the Boring Company's other use cases like train tunnels, emergency escape, exits for large company buildings, tunnels to undercity storage, sewage systems, solar system habitats, etc. All great ideas, but they're still just ideas. I haven't seen them executed, and again, wasn't the big game changer that we thought it was going to be. So I'm just using the Boring Company as an example, as Elon getting ambitious and excited about an idea and then abandoning it and kind of forgetting about it. And it turning into, okay, it wasn't all we thought it would be, but it's kind of cool for these things. So it didn't get rid of traffic, but hey, it helps with sewage systems. It could be something very similar with the Tesla bot. Where, okay, did this replace the entire manual labor force? No. But the hands are kind of handy. So now we use the Tesla bot to do some manufacturing stuff. Okay, that's kind of cool, but it doesn't mean it's a $100 trillion business. It turned out to be a $10 billion business instead of a trillion, like everybody likes to napkin math it to be. They're plugging. How long does something have to be plugging away before we consider it abandoned? It isn't executed because their CEO is narrow-minded. Same is happening to the rest of his companies. I'm not trying to say that the Boring Company itself has been abandoned. I'm saying the original mission, the original idea, we're kind of just taking the L and just accepting that's not really going to happen. The original idea has been abandoned, I think. Luxembourg has free public transport and has the same average number of cars per person as the United States. Exactly my point. The $1 million question is how much less people would buy Tesla if they knew it would not get autonomy one day. If they knew it would not get autonomy. I don't think it would change that much, to be honest. It might be anecdotal, but from the conversations I've had with people, most people are not into Teslas because they think they'll drive themselves. That seems to be a fairly tech bubble Twitter type thing. In general, the presumption that because something hasn't happened yet or is late or turned out to be harder than you thought doesn't mean it will now never happen. No, but it doesn't also mean it will definitely happen. Like, when did flying cars happen? Back in the 80s, everyone thought, oh, flying cars are the future. We still have, like, people attempting, okay, here's a electric VTOL thing, here's a helicopter with some wheels on it, that kind of thing. It's like, certain technology just doesn't catch on. Like hydrogen. I know, I'm sorry. I keep throwing hydrogen under the bus. Under the public transport bus. But some ideas just don't scale well and they just end up not happening. Even though the idea has been there for a while. There's other examples. Flying cars is the big one. Easy one. 3D movies is another one. It's like, well, just because it hasn't caught on yet doesn't mean it will never catch on. But it's like, yeah, but it's kind of not catching on. Tesla started 20 years ago on the mission of accelerating the transition. We still aren't transitioned to sustainable energy. Is it fair to say Tesla is a failure? No, I think they've achieved their mission. The mission was to accelerate the transition. Not, I think they have accelerated the transition. The mission technically was not remove all gas cars from the road. I mean, that would be a side effect. That's the end goal for sure. But the mission statement was accelerate the transition, which they believe is inevitable. And I do too. But I wouldn't say they failed their mission, but SpaceX has yet to achieve their mission. The mission statement of SpaceX is to make life multiplanetary. They're well on their way, and I wish Elon would spend all of his time on that. I think that's the coolest thing he's working on, and I think making life multiplanetary is a very exciting, noble milestone, and I wish them all the best in that. It's just a shame he's so distracted with a million other projects. We got to do Neuralink now. Now we got to do Boring Company. Now we got to do Twitter, and also we got to make bots at Tesla. And I'm like, I think Tesla will be fine. You should just focus all your attention on SpaceX. But Boring Company could bore quicker than all of them with their amazing tunneling tech. Instead, they focus on underground roadways. So many better use cases that they could dominate in. Again, it could be a scaling problem because the Boring Company tunnels are much, much narrower than a typical train tunnel has to be. So maybe in order to make a boring company train tunnel, you would need a boring machine that's much, much larger, and maybe it's not as fast when you make it larger, or it's not as cost effective when you make it larger. So it might be the kind of thing that makes sense for a small tunnel but not a big tunnel. Kind of like batteries as an example, because of the price per kilowatt hour and the weight per kilowatt hour. An EV makes a lot more economic sense when it's something like a sedan or a crossover versus a pickup truck. 3D is dope when done right. Yeah, but it's an edge case. Most people are not watching in 3D. 3D TVs, as an example. They started making them. They tried to sell them. Nobody bought them. Now they don't make them anymore. The difference being nobody sunk billions of dollars into building a flying car. I'm pretty sure they have. I just think it's not a good idea. They figured out after a while it's not good to have loud, noisy machines everywhere, and everybody can't be pilots, and air traffic control is too complex. It's honestly not that complicated to make something that can fly that can also go 70 miles per hour. You can stick an engine on a Cessna-looking thing and make foldable wings. They've done it. It's just the practicality of it falls apart, and I think they could come to similar conclusions with humanoid robots, which have definitely been attempted before. Now they're being attempted with large language models and neural net training, so people are hoping that addresses the software shortcomings. But again, like we've discovered with all kinds of AI projects, large language models are hard to predict, and they're hard to train to get them to do everything exactly right. They make big leaps in progress, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will reach the point of just as good as a human, which is oftentimes what you need in order for it to do a proper job. But anyway, my point is Elon can get distracted. And I think there could very easily be a scenario in which they deliver a few hundred robotaxis to a few hundred cities. Maybe not even a few hundred, maybe just a few dozen, half a dozen cities. And they just say, okay, there, we did robotaxis. And it turns out it brings in a few $1 million a year instead of trillions of dollars like they were anticipating. That's possible, which is why I'll believe it when I see it. I'll be the guy making videos about it when it happens, and I hope it does. But when they've been late this many times in a row, it's very difficult to keep the excitement high, because all we're really getting in regards to progress updates is, oh, the next version is insane. Oh, the next version is insane. Oh, the next version is insane. And, I can only hear that so many times. It's a little different when it's like, I don't know, for me it's more exciting when a vehicle is in development and they're providing updates on, like, okay, we've locked down a supplier for our powertrain, like Aptera just said, or we've been working on the tooling for our carbon fiber SMC bodies. You can actively see the progress being made. You can say, here's the lamination device that prints our solar panels, and you're like, okay, that's good. I see that momentum is happening. I just don't feel that as much with FSD, because it's just, well, the software update came out. It's better. It's better now. It's better now. It's like, okay, but then you fix one problem, you create 4 new ones and edge cases. And shouldn't that Dan O'Dowd guy be running out of material? I don't know. For 4 years now, I've been watching content creators and Tesla YouTubers, including myself, do videos on FSD where they say, wow, this is really impressive, but it's not quite done yet. It's not ready yet, but it's getting really good. Like, I've heard that for 4 years now. And I feel like if we were getting to the point of Robotaxi, Dan O'Dowd should run out of material to report on. And yet every time they release a new 12.5 whatever, he somehow is still able to find an edge case. And if it's this fast, if you can find an edge case within 24 hours of it running a stop sign or it doing something stupid that it's not supposed to do, it's not ready for prime time if it only takes 24 hours for a very, very limited set of vehicles that are running the software to do something it's not supposed to do. Like, in order for it to be legally widespread adopted, this has got to be incredibly hard to find an edge case. This has got to be like, millions of miles driven before we find one. And even then, the government's probably going to step in and say, oh, hold on, there's an edge case, we got to ground them. Just look at how they regulate the aviation industry. When an airplane does something bad, lights out. Yes, Aptera's still happening. Have I considered getting a spare tire due to my recent luck with tires? I have thought about it a bit. There's not as much storage space in this car that I would feel comfortable constantly hauling around a spare tire. But, the roadside service has been decent enough that I don't think I'm ready to pull the trigger on buying a whole new spare tire yet. But on a bigger vehicle that had more storage, I'd probably consider it. Like if I got a Rivian R2, and there was a way I could just hang it off the back or something, or a Tello truck, maybe I could just hang the tire off the tailgate or something. That, where it doesn't infringe on the capacity of the vehicle by that much, I'd be more into. But in the Model 3, I'm kind of space constrained, so if I get a spare tire, it's going to fill up the entire trunk, and I kind of use that trunk. But the number of model-defeating corner cases that the vehicle might ride into is significantly reduced if one of the endpoints is always fixed. Oh, the obvious place for robotaxis to start is car service, going from place X to fixed place, like an airport or a gigafactory. Yeah, kind of, but again, there can be edge cases within those locations, because the edge case can be built around how other drivers are behaving, or how the lighting is performing, or the experience I still have on a daily basis. A bug can fly into your camera, and now it can't see that well. Or my pothole story, the light can hit the camera in a certain way, and it panics and says, take over immediately. You can't have those kinds of things happening in a robotaxi. And you could drive it all day, and it would be fine, but then all of a sudden the sun is in the wrong place, reflects on the light, mix in with some bug guts, and boom, now it can't see the way it's supposed to see. So even on a fixed route, you could run into edge cases. No software can have a 100% success rate in a car. It needs to be 99.99999%. It's true, but I'm saying we're not there yet. We haven't reached 99.999%. Because people are still finding edge cases pretty easily. It doesn't take that long to find an edge case. To get to the trail of nines where you have like 5 nines behind the percentage point, it should take months to find an intervention, not hours. Only camera-based autopilot system can't work due to optics. Right, but the Tesla vision-based system is the one that scales up the fastest. If we expect everything to scale up at the rate of Waymo, then it's definitely not going to replace car ownership for a lot of people. Adding more nines is the name of the game. That's right, yeah. Aptera might actually be easier to get a spare tire because the tires are so small. They're smaller both circumference and width-wise. So I feel like I could probably throw a spare tire in the back of the Aptera. Or even just behind the front row seats. There's actually a surprising amount of room in the cabin. It's not really possible, but when I sat in the Aptera, I was like, it would be uncomfortable, but you could probably squeeze a second row in there. A very tiny second row, but I was amazed how much leg room I had, And you have to kind of move the seat up quite a bit so you can reach the pedals, and like my wife likes resting her feet against the, slanted part of the leg room area. So she would not, move the seat all the way back. But my point is there's a space beneath the trunk area that's more lifted up on the Aptera that you could probably snug a fourth wheel in, and then say, hey, it comes with 4 wheels. EV tax credit. Finding an edge case in India would take 5 minutes. Oh, it'd be much less than that. I mean, when I first got FSD beta, it took less than 5 minutes for me to intervene before it did something stupid. Humans have edge cases. There will always be issues. That's right, but when a human makes a mistake, that's one human that gets persecuted. That you got to penalize them, or that they're the ones taking care of the car or the accident. You have insurance. when you have one line of one software stack that is in control of millions of vehicles, you can't have the same failure rate as a human. It has to be substantially better than a human, because otherwise, Tesla's going to be responsible for thousands and thousands of accidents. A human can get negligent, but then they are penalized for it. Oh, you were texting and driving, you were drunk driving, or you weren't paying attention, so now you pay the bill. If Tesla has to pay all those bills, guess what? We know how stringy Tesla is with profit margins and how much risk they're willing to take on. They're not going to front the bill for that. The Renault 5 has a very small back row, maybe comparable to the Aptera. Yeah, I'm sure they spaced it out. I know Chris Anthony has talked about doing a jump seat where you could maybe have a tiny seat made for like a child, or maybe even a car seat for a baby that you could fit behind the second row. It'd be higher up. It wouldn't be down low, of course, but probably slightly smaller than a muscle car second row. Yeah. I'm not trying to say there really is a way to do a second row in an Aptera, but they've probably thought about the spacing of it, and I think you could maybe fit one tiny jump seat about right here for a very small child or a baby. They wouldn't be sitting at the same level as the front row, that's for sure. But with the small amount of space, I should pull up the B-roll. I know exactly what I'm referring to because I was sitting in it. It's in my Aptera folder. There's a shot here of with the trunk open. Man, it's such a cool looking thing. All right. Yeah, you can see my beautiful R3 background here. I love the R3. All right. This is what I'm referring to. So the seats are pushed back really far in this shot. They're basically as far back as they possibly can be, so that it's easy for people to get in and out. But my point is, there was so much legroom in the Aptera, and this is the Gamma prototype. Jason said that the production model will actually have better legroom. Those seats would be moved forward a little bit more, and you could probably slide right behind the center console a spare tire, because the spare tires are pretty narrow, and they're not super tall. Is there a better angle of I could find? Maybe here? Yeah, you can kind of see the gap back there. There's more interior shots. Oh, maybe this one? Yeah. No, there's no way you could really do a second row, but it'd be tight. But I think you could slide a spare back there for the cost of some leg room. Yeah, I could have seats sitting backwards like a Model S. That's not a horrible idea. How are the safety ratings on the Aptera? So they haven't been crash tested yet because they don't have a PI build, but that's why they're building the PIs right now. That should be in the next couple weeks. But yeah, once you build a production grade vehicle, that's when you can start crash testing it. There's no point in crash testing handmade prototypes because it's going to perform different once you switch to production grade parts. But yeah, they've built in as many safety systems as they possibly can. It's got frontal airbags, it's got a front crumple zone, it's rounded Formula One inspired roll cage on the inside, so the vehicle takes the blunt of the impact compared to a traditional vehicle, which is more square. Here's another example. They've simulated, which the simulations have gotten very good now, a lot of different crash testing. You can see these are energy absorbers, or impact rails you call them. So the front of the vehicle takes the blunt of the impact, and that collapses, and it redistributes down here so that the occupant doesn't feel the blunt of the impact, but the vehicle does. And then you can kind of see in a side impact here, because the Aptera is very airplane-like, it's very rounded on the side, the sides can crumple in a lot like they are here in a side impact without infringing too much on the occupant space or the battery pack, which is important. So that's if they got hit directly from the side. This doesn't even simulate if they got hit by the wheel pant, in which case the wheel and the axle is actually going to take the blunt of the impact, whereas in a traditional vehicle you would feel more of it because you have inboard wheels. So I think it will perform very well in the safety tests, but in the crash tests. But yeah, PI stands for production intent. It means that all of the parts in the vehicle are production grade parts. So that's what Lucid has rolling off the assembly line now with the Gravity. They are production intent. They're pre-production vehicles, which means that, you know, they were built with all of the same components that will be used in mass production. So they're not prototypes anymore. Having a bench in the back would be a great addition to the Aptera. Not the best seating for humans, but great for taller cargo like spare tires. For sure. And I think it'd be good for a lot of smaller animals. They have like a pet kit that they said it would be good for. You could have a little area back there for your dog or maybe your cat. I don't know if you're the kind of person who likes driving around with the cat, but oh, I see. Mike just sent me a picture of like an old sports car that has like a really small bench seat in the back. Yeah, the problem is the roofline on the Aptera just cut into it, so you probably couldn't fit very large people back there. But the new manufacturing processes and approaches Aptera has taken are the most interesting aspects of the vehicle and company. I agree, and that's why, even though, you know, devil's advocate could complain to me when I say, oh my God, we've been waiting for 4 years or 5 years for robotaxis and it's still not out. I'm not excited by it anymore. I'll believe it when I see it. And someone could probably say similarly, well, Drew, they've been talking about doing the Aptera for years and years and years now. I don't think it's been as long. Like, they didn't say 1 million Aptera by the end of 2020. I think when they launched, they originally were hoping for like end of 21, but it's a startup. They didn't have the resources, and also they got way more orders and way more demand than they originally thought they were going to get. So they kind of restructured the whole product around, you know, they can't do soft tooling. They had to do tooling that could meet demand. Otherwise, they weren't going to be able to keep up with orders. Originally, they were going to just build a few hundred of them, so they had to redesign the the Bink, so that it could be mass produced, and that took more time and money to make it carbon fiber instead of this original cannabis-based honeycomb material that they were going to use. So it ended up taking longer, of course, than they thought. But I guess the reason I'm more patient with Aptera is I know they're funding dependent, so that takes more time and money to get investors on board. But now they've got this deal with U.S. Capital Global, so that's cool. So the money should be coming in pretty soon here. And secondly, I know they're much smaller, whereas Tesla basically has infinite resources, infinite money. So I know it's not a money problem. And also, so much of the updates that Aptera provides are insightful. They're educational, and it makes me feel like, okay, this is really going to happen because I see production tooling and gearing up and stuff like that, opposed to just wait for the right software update to come along. People waiting for FSD. It's been so long. People waiting for Aptera. Lol. Well, yeah, especially compared to the Aptera 2E, which was... It looked pretty similar, but it's a fairly kind of completely different vehicle. I'm jealous for you Americans having the EV9 from only $60,000 for the long range. After the Kia EV3, it's my favorite car, especially in the blue. Yeah, I don't blame you. They're nice-looking cars. You're more excited about Aptera than Robotaxi because you see yourself as an Aptera user. I've just said you don't foresee yourself as a Robotaxi user. I mean, I would use it, but it wouldn't be exciting, I guess, is my problem. Like, like I would probably use it on a trip or a vacation. Like, oh, I don't have a rental car here. I guess I could use a Robotaxi, but it's just you get in a car and it drives itself. Whoa. But I can kind of do that now with Waymo. And I don't know. That's not as exciting to me as a car that you own, you get to take with you, and you can load up with storage, or you can drive yourself, and that it charges itself via solar. Heck, if Tesla made a solar Robotaxi, I'd be more pumped about that maybe. But I trust Aptera with timelines more than Tesla, but that's a really small bar to climb over. That's fair. Yeah, I would probably, if Robotaxis became a thing, I would turn this Model 3 into a Robotaxi, go out and make me money, and I'll drive my Aptera around. I still want to own my own vehicle, though. I guess that's why I have a hard time getting excited, is, to me, a Robotaxi is just an Uber without a driver, which is not that exciting or interesting. But an Aptera, is like a high range, fast charging, self charging, cool looking, futuristic. I don't know. I think more people would be excited to buy take Aptera out of the equation. It'd be more fun to buy a Cybertruck than it would be to ride in the back of an Uber. Right? Right? There's an ownership factor there that's more interesting. What's most exciting about full autonomy isn't robotaxis, but the fact that it reformats what a car could look like the same way electrification reformatted what cars are for. Maybe, yeah. The end result is a bus. It's just a little bus. I don't know. That doesn't get me as excited as a practical, drive where you want, when you want. The independence factor is there. There's people like owning things. They can treat them how they want. They can drive them how they want, where they want. I don't know. Something to me, maybe I'm an old fogey, but something to me screams that it will always feel uncomfortable to get into a vehicle with no steering wheel or pedals going 75 miles per hour down the freeway. I don't know. We don't even have that with airplanes. We know that there's a human in the front of the plane flying it. I feel like people would be a lot more uncomfortable if they knew that the plane was autonomous the entire time and there was no way for a human to take over. I don't know. That's just me. The number of people doing van life stuff will reach another level after level 5 autonomy is here. Robotaxis will also reshape cities and urban planning. I've heard it before. That's why I'm just going to keep saying I'll believe it when I see it. I remember talking to a guy on one podcast back in 2020 that was completely convinced. So he bought 4 Model Ys with full self-driving because he was going to turn them into his own robotaxi fleet. I don't know what happened to those cars now. They're definitely not worth what he paid for them, that's for sure. He paid $8,000 for FSD back then. Now it's back to $8,000. He's definitely not getting robotaxi money. Autonomous trains and buses. Now we're talking. Let's see it. Anyway, I'm just a fan of car ownership. I think that cars are fun to own, and they're nice to own. They're convenient to own, and the independence and the freedom of not being stuck to some other schedule. In my use case, it will make solo backpacking much easier. Drive to my start point, send car to my end point. Yeah, I could see that use case. Like, there's examples where me and my wife like to go tubing down a river, but of course a river only goes in one direction. So usually we have to do it with a group of friends so that we take 2 cars, we leave 1 car at the end point, and then we drive to the start point, and then we drive together to the start point, and then we ride in the river all the way to the end point, and then drive back to the start point. If you had a robotaxi, you could drop yourself off at the start point and then tell the robotaxi to go all the way to the end point. The problem is, almost every time we do that, it's at a gravel parking lot, and auto park I don't trust very much so far. It always has to back into a parking space, and it needs very specific line markings. If it doesn't see the line markings, then it doesn't think it can park. Will I be wrapping my Aptera or leaving it in the standard wrap from the factory? Probably the standard wrap, but a red Aptera does sound pretty sweet. I might wrap it red. I don't know. I need to figure out how much it would cost, because the Aptera should be much cheaper to wrap because it's a very small piece of material. Partnering for 2 vehicles is also done with canoe tripping. Yeah, exactly. Buying 4 Model Ys just for FSD. Yep, I talked to him. He was totally convinced. He said, next year I'm going to turn this into a robotaxi fleet. I don't know what he ended up doing. I haven't spoken to him since then, but man, I think he's out some money. He's probably experienced a good amount of depreciation. I don't know. But anywho, I better go eat some lunch. I'm getting hungry, but I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I love these kinds of talks. The EV streams are fun. It's kind of fun when there's not as many people because you can kind of keep up with the chat a bit, but you guys are awesome. Lots of fun to chat with, and let me know of any other topics you want to dive into in the future. So thanks all. Have a good one. Bye-bye.